Luke chapter 9. What the 12 kept forgetting. The ceiling fan turned at the same lazy pace it always did, and the late sun cut the same sharp bars across the cedar table. But tonight, Grace had cleared the whole surface except for one open Bible. No lexicons yet. No notebooks open. She wanted them to read the chapter first, straight through, before anyone reached for a tool. 9 verses in, Thomas said, tapping the page, and he's already stripped them down to nothing. No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, not even a change of clothes. That's not minimalism for its own sake. Watch what he gives them in the same breath. Power and authority over every demon, and the ability to cure diseases. He loads them with more spiritual authority than they've ever carried, and simultaneously removes every physical fallback they've ever leaned on. If it goes wrong out there, they can't fix it themselves. They have nothing to fall back on but him. So the emptying and the empowering happen in the same sentence, Grace said. That's the pattern for the whole chapter, isn't it? Every time he gives them something real, he first takes away their ability to manage it on their own terms. Miriam had been quiet, flipping ahead to verse 13, where the 12 came back from that very mission only to be handed an even bigger version of the same problem. She ran event logistics for a living. She'd fed rooms of 400 people and knew exactly what that took in staffing, prep time, and budget. 5,000 men, not counting women and children, she said. So realistically, we're talking something like 15,000–20,000 people sitting down in groups of 50 on a hillside with no warning and no supply chain. And Philip's response in John's account is the only sane response. He does the math out loud, and it doesn't work. Here, Luke has them say it plainly. Send the crowd away, let them fend for themselves, because we have nothing but 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's not a lack of faith exactly. That's just correct arithmetic. 12 disciples with a packed lunch cannot feed a small city, and he doesn't argue with the math. He takes the 5 loaves, he looks up to heaven, he blesses them, breaks them, and hands them back to the 12 to distribute. The miracle doesn't happen instead of their hands. It happens through their hands, on a loop, basket after basket, as long as they keep bringing what they have back to him instead of trying to stretch it themselves. 12 baskets left over, 1 for each of them, as if he wanted each man carrying home physical proof that what breaks in his hands multiplies, and what stays in yours runs out. That's the same lesson as the sending, Thomas said. Just scaled up so they can't miss it. Ethan had his pencil going now, and then 6 or 7 verses later, he asks them who people say he is, and who they say he is, and the second Peter gets it right. The Christ of God. Jesus does something that should stop us cold. He doesn't say, great, now go tell everyone. He says, don't tell anyone, and then immediately pivots to the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected, be killed, and rise on the 3rd day. Peter's correct confession becomes the doorway to a much harder truth, and then he turns it on all of them. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. Daily, not once, at the baptism, not once, at the calling. Every day you wake up and pick the thing back up. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. He's telling them the correct answer about who he is isn't the finish line. It's the start of a much more expensive dependence. David turned to the Transfiguration next 8 days later, and he leaned into what the text assumes his readers already know. Moses and Elijah show up talking with him about his departure. His exodus, that's the actual word Luke uses, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Moses led Israel out of Egypt through the sea. Elijah was the prophet who never saw death, taken up in the fire. Luke is placing the whole law and the whole line of the prophets in conversation with Jesus about a coming departure that will outdo both of theirs. And what does Peter do in the middle of the most important theological summit in human history? He offers to build 3 tabernacles, one for Jesus, one for Moses, one for Elijah, putting the Son of God on equal footing with 2 great but ordinary men, because Luke tells us plainly Peter didn't know what he was saying. The moment the cloud overshadows them and the voice speaks, "This is my Son, my chosen one, listen to him." Moses and Elijah are gone, and Jesus is found alone. The law and the prophets step back. One voice remains for them to depend on, and they come down the mountain straight into the failure, Samuel said, quieter than the others, his hands folded on the table like he was still turning the dirt over. A man in the crowd cries out about his only child, seized by a spirit that convulses him, and he says, "I begged your disciples to cast it out, and they could not." 9 men, still carrying the authority Jesus gave them back in verse 1, and it doesn't work. Jesus' response is sharp. "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you?" And then he heals the boy himself. They had the commission. They didn't have the connection in that moment. That's the whole chapter in one scene. The authority was never theirs to own. It only ever worked while they stayed plugged into him and the second they treated it as a possession instead of a channel, it went dead in their hands. Chloe had been watching the emotional undertow of the whole chapter build, and she caught it exactly where Luke puts the next scene. And right there, right after that public failure, and right after he tells them a second time that he's going to be delivered into human hands, what do? They start arguing about which of them is the greatest. It's almost too on the nose to be an accident. They can't process the humiliation of their own weakness, so instead of leaning harder into dependence on him, they reach for rank. If I can't be sure I'm powerful, at least let me be sure I'm important. Jesus doesn't rebuke them with words this time. He takes a child. Someone with zero social capital in that world, nothing to offer, nothing to leverage, stands the child beside him and says, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me." Greatness in this kingdom is measured by how low you're willing to go, not how high you climb. Then John gives us the mirror image of the same disease. Elena said, "Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he does not follow with us. Not because he was doing it wrong, because he wasn't part of their group." That's not zeal for Jesus. That's a guarded perimeter, and Jesus tells them plainly, do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you. The disciples had just watched their own authority fail on a boy nobody could heal, and instead of asking why, they turn around and try to gatekeep a man succeeding at the exact thing they just failed at. That's what happens when you stop measuring yourself by dependence on him and start measuring yourself against everyone else. Lucas had the map open on his tablet, tracing the road south. And this is exactly where Luke plants the hinge the whole gospel turns on. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. Everything after this verse, all the way to chapter 19, is organized around that single fixed bearing, not a strict timeline. He sends messengers ahead into a Samaritan village, and they won't receive him because his face is set toward Jerusalem. Samaritans and Jews didn't share a road when it came to worship, and this crowd could read exactly where he was headed and why. James and John want to call fire down from heaven the way Elijah once did. Jesus turns and rebukes them, and they move on to another village. No fire, no forced entry. He doesn't defend the destination by burning the ones who reject it. He just keeps walking toward it. And that's the temperature for the last scene, Elena said. The three men on the road. The first one says he'll follow wherever Jesus goes, and Jesus doesn't welcome the enthusiasm. He tells him foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. No signing bonus. No guaranteed shelter. If you're looking for a stable base to operate from, this isn't that. The second one is the one people misread, David said. Let me first go and bury my father. If his father were already dead, the son would be sitting with the body under Judean burial custom, not standing on a road negotiating with a traveling rabbi. This was the standard idiom for staying home until the father died naturally, years off, so the son could secure the family inheritance before committing to anything else. Jesus' answer, leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God, refuses the deferral. He's not condemning grief. He's refusing a discipleship that waits for a safer, better-funded season. And the third one wants to say goodbye to his family first, Samuel said. Which sounds reasonable, until you remember Elisha did exactly that when Elijah called him, kissed his parents, slaughtered his oxen for a farewell feast, and went. Jesus holds this man to a higher bar than the very prophet whose mantle started the whole prophetic line. No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. A man walking a one-handled wooden plow behind an ox can't watch the ground behind him and still cut a straight furrow. The moment his focus splits, the line bends. Following, in this chapter, was never going to accommodate a divided gaze. Grace closed the Bible slowly, the room dim now, the fan still turning overhead. So read it as one line instead of 9 stories, she said. Empty their hands so they'll need him. Verse 3. Multiply through their hands what they can't stretch on their own. Verse 13. Tell them the right confession is only the beginning of a much harder road. Verse 22. Silence the law and the prophets, so one voice remains. Verse 35. Let their borrowed authority fail the moment they treat it as their own. Verse 40. Watch them reach for rank. The instant dependence gets humiliating. Verse 46. Watch them guard a border instead of trusting the source. Verse 49. Set his face toward the one destination that requires it. Verse 51. And refuse every attempt to negotiate a safer, slower, better cushioned version of following him. Verse 57 to the end. It's not 9 lessons. It's one lesson, 9 times, until it finally sticks.